Anti-US slogans are almost everywhere in Yemen's capital Sana'a. Houthi fighters stand guard next to a banner that reads, "Death to the US, death to Israel." Security is tight because of fighting on the outskirts of the capital. Forces backed by Saudi-led coalition are on the offensive. The Houthis are taking no chances. The Shia rebels captured the capital in 2014. If they lose it, their control over northern Yemen will come to an end.
The
war waged against us by the Saudi-led coalition is absurd. It's a barbaric aggression on the people of Yemen. They talk about human rights and they bomb children and women.
But in other parts of the country, Yemenis blame the Houthis for committing atrocities against civilians. The city of Taiz has become the focal point of the fighting between troops loyal to President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi and the Houthis. After 3 years of intense fighting, no one has the upper hand.
The reason why we couldn't defeat the Houthis is lack of weapons. We don't have mortars, heavy weapons, and trained soldiers. We cannot move forward because the whole area is mined, and we don't have demining devices.
War has weakened the government and created a power vacuum. Secessionists in the southern part of the country have stepped in. They say they want to have a state of their own. Over the last few weeks, the separatists launched a series of attacks and occupied government buildings in the city of Aden. They are mainly backed by the United Arab Emirates.
We thought the 1990 Union would be a great thing, but security forces in the north launched a clampdown on our people, killing activists and destroying southern provinces. Unity for us is dead. We're getting closer to establishing our independent state.
The crisis is deepening. The United Nations top envoy to Yemen stepped down after failing to convince the feuding factions to set aside their differences and negotiate a deal to end fighting. Hashim Al-Bara, Al Jazeera.
With the only available drinking water located miles away, the children carry what they can collect on the backs of donkeys. But the rough terrain makes an already difficult situation even more arduous. Violence caused these families to flee their homes in the village of Ya'is in southern Yemen's Al-Dala governorate. Another reminder of how the conflict in Yemen is deepening what the UN calls the worst man-made humanitarian crisis in the world.
We're
now living in caves as a result of the war. We are facing harsh living conditions, especially the ferocious cold. Our homes have been destroyed.
Hardship has become the norm for these Yemenis. The adults worry the children will suffer the worst. And in this makeshift camp, hope is dwindling as temperatures drop.
This year's winter is the worst in years. The temperature has hit -5 degrees. The displaced families are living through harsh conditions, and most of them took shelter in caves. It is a humanitarian crisis. They need immediate shelter and relief aid.
In a country where children have been at higher risk of contracting cholera and diphtheria, this boy is suffering from severe pneumonia and hoping the hospital will have enough medication to help him recover. Even the internally displaced who managed to escape to a nearby town are still living in extremely harsh conditions, constantly searching for water and always seeking warmth. Mohammed Jamjoom, Al Jazeera.
The intensity of the fighting on the ground in Yemen is showing no signs of letting up. While the Saudi-led coalition targets Houthi rebels, infighting between Yemen's political factions has turned city streets into front lines. After more than 3 years of war, the United Nations says the humanitarian crisis here is the worst in the world, and it's children who are suffering the most. At this hospital in western Al-Dahle province, babies and their mothers are brought here for treatment. Most suffer from severe malnutrition. But with little money and even fewer resources, health officials say there isn't much they can do.
Most of our patients are suffering from malnourishment, especially babies who breastfeed from their mothers. The number of children that are dying is higher than that of mothers, as we are unable to treat severe cases. We are also unable to provide proper nutrition to pregnant women.
The United Nations Children's Charity says at least 5,000 children have been killed or injured since the start of the war. That means on average 5 children lose their lives or are maimed every day. The UN says more than 11 million children, nearly every child in Yemen, needs some form of humanitarian assistance to survive.
The ongoing war has led to the spread of war-related epidemics such as cholera, which broke out in Yemen last year. This exacerbated the malnutrition crisis and caused the number of cases to double. However, we'll never know how bad the situation is because many people cannot make it to hospitals or medical centers.
Saudi Arabia says it has sent nearly $1 billion worth of aid to Yemen and plans to spend another $1.5 billion. But rights groups accuse the Saudi military's air campaign of repeatedly striking civilian targets, including markets and medical facilities, and say the coalition's blockade on ports under Houthi control has been a major factor in pushing Yemen into near starvation. Whatever the case, the war and the humanitarian crisis it's caused is likely to continue for some time. Imtiaz Tayyab, Al Jazeera.
A years-long civil war in Yemen is taking a heavy toll on the civilian population. One America's Kendra Sidden has the latest.
Riyadh and its U.S.-backed allies see the civil war in Yemen as a way to counter Iran's regional influence. But thousands of airstrikes have failed to achieve victory over Houthi rebels. Some experts say the 3-year civil war, which has killed 10,000 people, is in a stalemate, and more sides in the conflict keep opening up. The local allies, backed by the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, turned on each other last week, prompting an emergency meeting between their supporters. The Iran-backed Houthis are still launching rockets towards Saudi Arabia, who joined the fight to back the government. The conflict has also given ISIS-affiliated and other terrorists opportunities to carry out attacks. The civilians caught in the multi-fronted war are paying the price, with the world's worst humanitarian crisis.
75% of the population, or 22 million people, need some form of humanitarian assistance. About half of those people are in acute need. That means they really need life-saving support for them to just to survive. So, and unfortunately, this is entirely man-made.
According to the Red Cross, without medical supplies, 1 million people have been infected with cholera, killing 2,000 residents. An additional 47,000 people have been displaced since December. Saudi Arabia's blockade on all ports has now been lifted, but temporarily made food prices rise by 50% for the starving population, prompting international criticism of the move. Since opening the ports, Saudi Arabia has sent humanitarian aid to civilians in Yemen, even as it continues to conduct airstrikes.
They are our neighbors, they are human beings first, so we are part of the international agencies that giving aids in Yemen. We are not alone, but we try to give them as much as we can.
Saudi Arabia is also working to stimulate Yemen's economy with $2 billion in aid. The country met with delegates from the UAE, UK, and US last week to discuss how to distribute the money. Meanwhile, Riyadh says it is not intentionally targeting civilians in rebel-held areas with its airstrikes.
Our objective is very clear. We are working to take back the legitimate government, and we will work for it, and there is no planning for systematic attack for civilian.
According to the UN, the Saudi-led coalition killed 68 children in Yemen in the last 3 months. Also on Sunday, an airstrike on a government building mostly killed civilians.
We were stunned by the explosion, even though the Saudi aggressor knows that this is an independent civilian building that serves the citizens. The strike targeted the civilians who are coming to sign their good conduct documents, killing many and injuring many of them.
Saudi Arabia has conducted 46 airstrikes in the past 2 days, as it seeks to take back control of the rebel-held areas of its southern neighbor. Kendra Sitton, One American News.
We can use your help. Call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call today.